Hey Blender artists, how's it going? Welcome to the third installment of the Blender 2.8 Fluid Simulation video series. If you missed the last couple of videos, I'll put the links in the description below. Do go check them out, as they do cover important topics for fluid simulation. Now in this video, we'll be going over time mapping, so buckle up and jump into Blender because it does get a little bit complicated. As usual, we will start by scaling up the default cube a little bit, giving it a fluid domain attribute, adding a new cube, bringing it up a little bit, and adding a fluid type of attribute with the volume initialization set to both. So time mapping is attached to the domain object, and it's everything down here from time start to offset. Now it's not listed as time mapping, but this is what these controls are doing. So to explain how this works, the time start and end and speed and whatnot, I am going to use visual aids, so you don't actually have to hop into Blender really. Here is a timeline of a 10-second water animation. Now, if you look at the default values for the simulation, for the time start, it's set to 0. That means your simulation will start at this point, 0 seconds. If it was 1, the simulation would start at 1 second. The default end time is 4, right here. This means that your simulation, no matter how many frames it is, it will end once the simulation time has reached 4 seconds. If it was 5, it would end after 5 seconds, etc., etc. You get the idea. In other words, with a start time of 0 and an end time of 4, your simulation will represent 4 seconds of time, like 4 seconds of water splashing around, no matter how many frames long it is. So if you have a 1000 frame animation, but your time is mapped like this, time start at 0 and time end at 4, then you will have a 250 frame per second video of water. So like, this is important, you have to make sure you get this right. Now, if your simulation was set to start at 1 and then end at 5, it would still be a 4-second simulation, but the simulation would start after 1 second had already gone by. Now, this could be useful if you wanted to show water falling fast, but you didn't want to render the whole sequence of water accelerating or bake it. Or, to pick a more precise example, there's an excellent tutorial, I'll put the link in the description, for how to make waves in Blender that actually break. Now, it does require some startup time, so with this you could start the simulation, 10 seconds in, and then after it baked, it would just start with waves, and you wouldn't have to wait for you wouldn't have to wait for it to accelerate, so to speak. So the speed represents the speed of the simulation, effectively lengthening the simulation time. Like if your speed is 2, then it won't actually end at 4, it'll end at 8. And it's just compressed to make it look like, to take up the same number of frames. I don't really understand why they have speed instead of just having these controls. I don't understand what the advantage it gives you is. So then there's this toggle, generate speed vectors. I don't actually know what this is for. My guess is that it's for the vector blur node in the compositor. If you go over to compositing, use nodes, you can add a vector blur node, but I do not know for sure. I don't actually know what it's for. If any of you know what it's for, comment below and then we'll all know, because open source. There's reverse frames, which will play the simulation backwards after it's baked it. So if you want to see water fly up instead of fall down, you can check reverse frames. And then offset. Offset is the last thing, and it slides what you're looking at over by frames, like in terms of frames. This will not be helpful unless you've baked a certain number of frames, let's say 250, and then shortened your timeline down to, let's say, 200. Now you have these 50 frames of baked simulation that you're not rendering. So then you could take that and slide it along with the offset tool. So that's what the offset's for. Unless you bake more than you are expecting to render, it's not actually helpful. So yeah, that's time mapping. I will put some samples at the end of what things look like when you just leave it default at 250 frames in 4 seconds, and then I'll show what they ought to look like sped back up. So thanks for watching. Drop a like and a subscribe, and keep creating. Have a great day.